Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you. A couple of days late, but here with you once again. How are you feeling, bud?
I was a little sick last week, and that's why we had a bit of a delay, but I am back for the attack.
Awesome, and very timely at that, as we will be talking about Dokken's 1987 release, Back for the Attack, in just a few moments. But before we do, a couple of housekeeping matters. Number one, we will be back on schedule next Monday when we release the Shadow Gallery retrospective, which is something that I think we're both looking forward to quite a bit. And I think that we've been listening to a lot of Shadow Gallery on the heels of the Dokken album. So I think that's going to be very, very interesting. And number two, we received quite a bit of good feedback from our Fourth Dimension episode when we covered Stradivarius last week. So much so that I believe somebody actually decided to release a new album to go, to kind of go coincide with our release. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of days after posting the episode, it was announced that Timo Tolkki would be releasing a new album under his Avalon banner, which has kind of been like his answer to Avantasia, where he just brings in a whole bunch of guest vocalists, and the lineup for this album looks incredibly strong. Just to name a few: Pelike, who formerly of Damnation Angels, and he does a lot of stuff, solo stuff on his own. Brittany Slays from Unleash the Archers, James Labrie from Dream Theater, Jake E. from formerly of Amaranth. Who was the band that we were talking about who sounded like Bruce Dickinson?
Oh, Rafael Mendez singing for Icon of Sin. Also very, very timely, because I think we mentioned that last week as well. Like I said, this album was basically created in response, and very quickly at that, in response to our episode last week. But that's Rafael Mendez out of Brazil.
Right. And so he's going to be on this album as well. And then filling out the rest is Angra and Rhapsody vocalist Fabio Leone, and Marina La Taraca, who I've mentioned on the show from Phantom Elite and Exit Eden. She had posted on her Facebook. That's actually how I found out about this. She was really excited to be a part of this. I really enjoyed the first and the third Timo Tolkki Avalon album. I thought the second one was a little bit weaker, but I thought the first and the third albums were really good. So I'm looking forward to hearing his fourth release under the Avalon banner.
Yeah, and it's been about 2 years, so obviously I'm sure things have had a time to marinate. And you speak about rock operas. I actually heard something else this week that just blew me away. Soul Spell, which is a Brazilian band that's kind of like an Avantasia with a bunch of musicians, not quite the same notoriety, but they obviously release kind of power metal rock operas in that same vein. They released a cover of the Wake of Magellan song from Sabotage. I think I listened to it every day since it's come out, because I thought it was just such an excellent cover that they did. If you haven't had a chance to hear that, and I'll post it later this week, exceptionally well done, and one of the best covers I've ever heard. And I just they've done a number of covers. They've covered Sonata Arctica, they've covered Halloween, they've covered a bunch of bands, but I thought they just really hit it out of the park with this one.
Their covers, I mean, their original stuff is really good, but their covers are really just worth checking out. I especially think their cover of Halloween's "We Got the Right" is one of the coolest cover songs I've ever heard. Just the talent involved in that is just really incredible. We did post it, the Wake of Magellan cover. I was just scrolling through our Facebook page. I might have posted it. Maybe you didn't see it, but I posted on our page on March 19th. But nice. Feel free to post it again.
Yeah, it's definitely worth another listen if you have heard it, and if you haven't, do yourself a favor and check that out. One other thing that really kind of hit me this week, the guitar player and songwriter extraordinaire from Amorphous, Esa Holopainen, he came out with I guess what's going to be a solo album for him under the name Silver Lake. And the song that was released a couple of days ago was called Storm. This was not what I was expecting when I heard that this material was being released. It's got a little bit of a different feel, definitely a cleaner feel than some of the Amorphous material. But the guy is such a talented songwriter that the song just blew me away. I'll make a point of posting that as well. His new solo material. I look forward to the full length album coming out on May 28th, just because he's such a consistently good songwriter that I have no doubt the rest of the album will be fantastic. And I believe that's coming out on Nuclear Blast Records on the 28th of May, like I mentioned.
Very good. I would definitely be interested in checking that out. As we've said many times, Amorphous has been one of the most consistent bands as far as just coming out with one excellent release after another.
Yeah, I no question about that. I think you'd be hard pressed to find the band that's more consistent than them over the last 15 years or so, which is quite a statement. But with that, let's get to the reason why we're here. I had mentioned I guess a little bit in the introduction to the show last week, or when I had picked Back for the Attack. Dokken to me is a band that I can't say that I ever really dove that deep into the back catalog of, but I would still put them as the preeminent hair metal band for me, just because the songs I know I've always loved. And they're a band that whenever I hear, I never really turn off, just because I don't think they have many bad songs in their classic period. But before I get into how I kind of first heard them, was this your first exposure to the band, or had you heard some of their stuff before?
Not a lot, but the two songs I was very familiar with were In My Dreams, which was from the previous album Under Lock and Key, and Kiss of Death, which is the opening track on this album that we're going to talk about. And I just remember really liking those two songs, but never really listening to much else. I think I want to say that the first track that I mentioned, In My Dreams, was part of an 80s metal like compilation album that I had, and that probably would have been my introduction to Dokken. And I think you at some point in time had recommended that I check out the song Kiss of Death, which I ended up really enjoying as well. I believe you posted a cover version of that, Vandenplas doing a cover of that song.
Yeah, so that's exactly what my first exposure to the band was. Going back a ways, I was a huge Vandenplas fan, and I still am to this day. And I remember picking up Far Off Grace in 2000, going way back. And one of the bonus tracks on that disc was a cover of Kiss of Death. It was the last track. And I kind of got the feeling that song was not really part of the rest of the album, which, quite frankly, we should do that in long form, because I have a lot to say about Vandenplas and Far Off Grace. But that bonus track I loved. It was just kind of felt a little bit different than the rest of the album. And after kind of going through the booklet and doing a little bit of a deep dive, I realized that it was a cover of a band called Dokken, which I had heard of, but I really had never heard up to that point. So I guess somewhere around 2002, I had bought their Best of CD at a store, just because I thought it was time to take a listen to some of the bigger hits that they had. Believe it or not, Kiss of Death is not on there, but there were 16 tracks, 4 of which were actually on this album that we're going to talk about in a minute. But I'll say, but from the moment that I heard them, I said to myself, I thought that they were just a little bit better than every other hair band I had ever heard. Not to say that I don't love some of those bands or songs by those bands, but I always just appreciated the melodies that they kind of put forth. And they've kind of had a tumultuous history throughout the years. But to say that this album, Back for the Attack, is right in the middle of their heyday, I think would be an understatement. This was a pretty big album for them. And for those not aware, I'll just give a little bit of history. The namesake, the band is named after Don Dokken, the vocalist, who's been with them since the beginning.
Not Doc Dokken.
No, do not confuse the two, for sure. And with Don Dokken in the classic lineup was guitarist George Lynch, who gets a lot of the songwriting credits, Jeff Pilson, the bassist, and a drummer that goes by the name of Wild Mick, who's been with them. He was their longtime drummer. He's played with a number of different bands as well, Ted Nugent, Exciter, to name another two. And this classic lineup really did stay together throughout most of the 80s and released classic album after classic album. And the band is kind of fallen from grace a little bit since then. They've broken up. They've gotten back together, and they actually reunited to do a couple of shows in the last couple of years. Some would question whether or not the vocals are still there, or whether Dokken can sing like the way he used to, 30 years ago. But what I can say for sure is that at the time, this band was really up there with all the other major hair bands, the Motley Crues, the Poisons, all those bands that were really beginning to hit it in the mid to late 80s. They were right there with them. And this is their fourth release that came out in November of 1987. I guess I'll ask you this. I know that obviously the first track is Kiss of Death, so that wasn't new to you. What jumped out to you as you were listening to this whole album for the first time?
Before I answer that, I wanted to ask you a question.
Yeah.
How long did you think Kiss of Death was a Vandenplas song?
I had great question. I had some suspicion right away, but because it just didn't sound like the rest of the album, Far Off Grace, I just never questioned it because I was just so enamored with the album that as soon as Kiss of Death ended, I went right back to the beginning of the album and played it again. I just love that disc, and I think that was kind of their magnum opus. But I guess going through the booklet, I quickly realized that it was definitely a cover, and not like you in your experience with Back to Back when Hammerfall covered that, where I think that you thought it was a Hammerfall song for like 15 years.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up. I really had no idea I really didn't know who Pretty Maids were or why anyone would cover them, and I would learn very quickly how that was missing from my life. But yeah, that's kind of when you were talking about that. That's what it reminded me of. So my initial impression of this album was I was a little bit surprised that it got lumped into the hair metal kind of area because it didn't really remind me of like the Poisons and the Motley Crues of that time. It was more of like, it reminded me more of like a US version of the Scorpions, where it was a little bit more just like straight to the point, hard rock, heavy metal, not really kind of, it didn't have kind of the cheese factor, I guess, that you get from some of that glam hair metal stuff, which, trust me, I enjoy quite a bit. But I thought that this kind of had a more serious tone to it. More like we're here to like play our instruments and be musicians, and not so much like try to get laid, I guess.
I think that there was a lot of that, but maybe they were just a little bit.
Well, they weren't singing rougher about it every other song.
well, that's true. I think the lyrics are definitely a little bit different. What I'll say is this: I think that I definitely hear the Scorpions there, right? Like, so I know quite a bit about the Scorpions back catalog. I've seen them in concert, and this definitely is in the same vein as that. Although I think that a lot of people would say that mid '80s Scorpion stuff is kind of hair metal in and of itself. So it's interesting. What I also thought was interesting is that the album starts with what is by far the heaviest track on the disc, and Kiss of Death is really an outlier on the album because the rest of the disc doesn't sound anything like it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a little bit more, I guess, like
raw.
Yeah. Like I would tend to agree. I found that like it kind of was. I feel like it's kind of becoming a theme that we bring up, like not being able to kind of pick one song out from the next because it's kind of similar sounding.
Yeah.
So like Mr. Scary like really popped for me because it was like a very it almost reminded me of something you'd hear from like a 90s power metal album where you have like this just kind of this guitar solo instrumental track. I was really kind of surprised to hear something like that on an album like this, and it was kind of a nice change, but the rest of the songs like pretty much are kind of had like that kind of just 80s rock song kind of flair. Like all very much enjoyable, but I feel like, in all honesty, to me, like Kiss of Death and Dream Warriors, which are the first and last songs, were the two that really stuck out the most, that felt the most unique. And then everything else, other than Mr. Scary, kind of, I feel like it kind of fell into like a I guess just kind of like the sound of the day, I guess.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that, and it's interesting that you would bring up those two tracks because it really does kind of make the buns on the sandwich here, if you will. I think that a lot of the bands of this era were kind of guilty of this in the sense that they would release an album. This one's a little bit longer. It's almost 60 minutes, but they would release an album and they would have 2 or 3 songs on the album that were just head and shoulders above the rest. And I think that this album, as good as it is, suffers from that as well. I listened to it a bunch. I think I listened to this maybe more than any other album we've discussed because I really wanted to see if over time it was going to pop for me in terms of being like an all-time classic. It didn't, but I think that's because I thought that there were 4 songs in particular that was just head and shoulders above the rest. I do find Mr. Scary to be very, very interesting. I didn't think it was the best track on the disc. I think it's an interesting track, but you hit 2 of them, Kiss of Death and Dream Warriors, which always to me were the 2 best albums the 2 best songs on the album. That hasn't changed. The other 2 that I would kind of lump in there that really just grabbed me were Night by Night, which I thought has a really catchy chorus. And I think that the biggest surprise for me was Burning Like a Flame. I love that track. And I was not terribly surprised to find out that was a single for the album. And I also knew the track from that Best Of that I had mentioned at the outset. But that song, I don't think I ever enjoyed as much as I did this go round. Because when I got the Best Of disc, it really just got lost in the shuffle. But when it was on this album, kind of just in the middle of the album, it really popped for me.
Yeah, that's cool. I actually really liked So Many Tears. I thought that was a really catchy tune. I mean, all the songs are really good. But like you said, same with me. I didn't really see it as like an all-time classic album, but I mean, it blew away the Anthrax album for me. So 1987 has been redeemed.
Oh, that was my main goal. So at least I accomplished that.
But like, I just really enjoyed the whole experience. The album was a lot meatier than I thought it was going to be as far as length goes.
For an album that came out in 87, I thought it was going to be like 40 minutes.
Right. I was expecting like, your 4 tracks on each side of the vinyl and, 35 to 45 minutes. And this thing's a good hour long. I don't think that it drags. Like, it's really well paced. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I mean, I have to say, like, some of the songs I might not be able to like pick out of a lineup with all of them listed together, but I definitely agree with the 4 that you mentioned. I really I thought this was very solid, and much like Killers listening to Killers was an eye opener, an ear opener, if you will, for me. This was too, and I would definitely be interested in hearing more of what Dokken did, because like I said, beyond this album, I don't really know very much.
So I would agree, and what I would say is that towards the second half of the album, there was a run of songs that I thought were a little bit pedestrian. Not bad. I don't want to mistake pedestrian for bad. It's just that they don't pop like some of the other songs. I'm talking about Lost Behind the Wall, Stop Fighting Love, Cry of the Gypsy, Sleepless Night. There was really those 4 tracks I don't love. They're fine. I listen to them. I certainly enjoy them for what they are, but I thought that the other songs were definitely a step up. But then it ends with arguably their best track off the album, and one of the most popular. Dream Warriors was actually released as the first single from the album, and it was the title track to Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. And to be honest with you, if you've never seen the Dream Warriors music video, you're doing yourself a disservice. it's one of the best music videos ever because they splice in parts of the movie with the band, which I thought was just really, really well done for the time. And admittedly, I'm not a big horror movie guy, but I appreciate having seen some of those movies and having obviously knowing that song. It's a real nice mesh of the two. And I'll definitely post that as well, just because it's something that people should see.
Yeah, and it's not terribly surprising just because you're talking about the heyday of MTV and music videos really being an art form. And I think that with what was the Headbangers Ball on MTV, you have this display for, metal bands to really show their music videos. And while, Manowar decided to give us throw your speakers or throw your sneakers, blow your speakers. We were also blessed with, the Halloween video by Halloween and like you said, Dream Warriors, from Dokken. I mean, this was just such a great time for music videos, like the mid to late 80s. It probably sounds so foreign to tell somebody who was born, after like 1995 that MTV actually just played music videos for most of the day.
They did.
Yeah. Well, I'm old enough to remember it, and I'm not that much older than you. So, I remember, like, as a kid, we had cable as far back as I can remember, and I loved music videos when I was just 5 or 6 years old. I just loved just that art form of. I could remember watching, seeing Weird Al videos, and Michael Jackson videos, and stuff that I remember even that young. So yeah, this was definitely. I have to see this Dream Warriors video because I have not seen it, but you know how I am about music videos. So.
Yeah, I was going to say you are going to love it. Just knowing your appreciation for this kind of stuff, you are going to absolutely love it. I'll just give a couple of more interesting tidbits. I've never seen the band live. I have, though, seen George Lynch, the guitar player, live. I went to an Yngwie Malmsteen concert back in 2004. This was probably. Oh, it was springtime 2004. It was probably about 17 years ago right now. He played a show with George. Malmsteen plays with George Lynch, who opens the show. And obviously, he played some of his Lynch Mob stuff, but he also played a bunch of Dokken songs. So I got to hear Mr. Scary and Kiss of Death live as part of the set, and it was really, really awesome. And what really stuck out to me was his guitar is like, or at least one of the guitars that he used was like this skeleton thing. I have no idea how he got this custom-made guitar, but if you've never seen the skeleton guitar, go out of your way to check out a picture of this thing. It's one of the coolest looking guitars I've ever seen. I'm not so sure that it makes him any more proficient as a result of playing it, but he certainly is a gifted guitar player, and this thing was just really something to behold when you saw it live.
Well, I don't think I've ever told you this story, but I've actually seen Wild Mick live, and
get out of here.
It was at the Meadowlands Arena, and he jumped off the steel cage and elbow dropped Hunter Hearst Helmsley. In the opening match at SummerSlam 97. So that was my experience seeing Wild Mick Foley live in person.
It's funny. I was not there for that, although I think I probably enjoy that more than the drumming on the album because it is a little, I would say this, of the entire stuff on the album, I think you'd agree that drumming is the one thing that really just doesn't kind of stand out to you. Another thing I love that I don't know if you appreciate this as much as I did, but the backing vocals are awesome, and the fact that they can do some of those harmonies are just again another thing that separates them from some of the other bands at the time.
I think the vocals in general are really strong on this album. You had mentioned that maybe his vocals haven't stood the test of time, but listening to like the studio album from 1987, the dude's got pipes, or at least he used to.
Oh yeah, I mean he was widely regarded as one of the best of the era. Give me your track of the week.
Oh, Dream Warriors, hands down. What an awesome song that is. I can't believe I wasn't really aware of it until now, but like that's gonna be one of those songs that if I ever like hear it on any of the metal stations on satellite radio, like I will definitely like pump up the volume. What a kick-ass song.
Hard for me to argue. That is a fantastic song. A couple of other notes I just think that are definitely worth mentioning. As I said, Dream Warriors was the first single. It came out. It actually charted at number 22. Prisoner, which I was surprised was a single because it wasn't my favorite song on the album, but it came in at number 37. Burning Like a Flame at number 20. And then the album itself went platinum on January 14th of 1988, which is pretty remarkable when you consider it's just, bands at this time were kind of just churning out recordings every single year or every other year. And this was just a long line of successful albums for them. Metal Rules had ranked this the number 12 glam metal album of all time. I can totally see that, or being up there at least, just because it is good. It is good, and there's really no bad songs on the album. It's just, I don't think it's the perfect album. But for me, it's easy for me to say Kiss of Death is my song of the week, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go with Burning Like a Flame just because I loved it so much this time around. And it's just something that I never paid much mind to in the past.
Cool. That's interesting. I was wondering if this was going to be the week where we had a matching song of the week, but I guess we carry on with different choices.
Different. Yeah, but Dream Warriors is an excellent choice for sure. And like I said, the video is if we were doing the video of the week, no question. but I got more enjoyment out of Burning Like a Flame because I don't think I ever enjoyed it as much in the past, whereas Dream Warriors, I kind of just knew it was awesome, so it was not even much of a surprise for me. So I think that definitely had a lot to do with it. And just one other thing that I think is worth mentioning, the producer on this album was Neil Kernon. And if you're not familiar with his work, you probably are and just don't realize it. The guy has worked with more bands since 1975 than just about any producer on the planet. And when I say that, I'm talking about Neil Diamond, Hall & Oates, Yes, Cannibal Corpse, Nevermore, Peter Gabriel, Nile, The Scorpions, Queensryche. I mean, he is all over the map, and he's doing it for all these different genres.
Ockercock.
And ironically, what?
Ockercock.
Oh yeah, I mean, how could I forget that? And interestingly enough, and I think this is a perfect segue to next week, he also mixed Shadow Gallery's Legacy album.
Oh well. That I did not know that.
I had a feeling you wouldn't, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. The guy, and he's still going strong. It's just his writing, or I should say, his producing and mixing credits are way too many to announce. And he's obviously very good at what he does because he's worked with some fantastic artists over the decades. And we'll talk about his work again next week. What are you ranking this album on a scale of 1 to 10?
This one is it's a strong 7.5 for me. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I don't know if I would put it in like that upper echelon of some of the 8s or the 9s, but like definitely something I would not turn off or I would definitely not mind like listening to the whole 13 track album again. Just really solid, like definitely better than I expected. And it really kind of makes me want to dig more into this era of music and metal in the 80s, just because it's just not something I'm not as familiar with, songs by Rat and Motley Crue beyond like the radio hits. Like it would be, it makes me want to kind of dig into some of the more, I guess just some of the songs that seem a little bit less goofy and cheesy and made for MTV music videos and stuff that's a little bit more, I don't know. I guess I don't know if serious is the right way of putting it, but more mature, I guess.
Sure.
Because this was, I mean, you just kind of hear Dokken the same way I hear Rat, and I just think here's another Motley Crue, another Poison. But after listening to the album, I don't think that's the case. At least not anymore. So it'd be interesting to hear other albums from that time. And as much as I didn't love the Anthrax album, it's a good like comparison because it came out in the same year, just to hear what another metal band was doing at the exact same time. Something that somebody that's not really into metal might just say like, oh, it's the same thing.
Meanwhile, they sound completely different.
Yeah. We would say that they might as well be different genres.
Oh, they are. I mean, they for all intents and purposes, if you want to really dig deep, I'll say this, and maybe we'll do some more of these types of albums as we go forward, over time. But it's one of those, I had it on when I was working a lot of the time, and I found myself like kind of just singing along or nodding my head because it was just enjoyable and like almost like an easy listen. And again, I love my prog metal, but at the same time, sometimes you just want something that's a little bit more digestible, and this gives it to you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. This is it's something that I think would be like great to listen to like in the car while you're driving. I kept wanting to play it in the car, and every time I pulled out my phone, I was like, I never put the damn album on my phone. So
Oh, wow.
I just kept forgetting or whatever. So I was like, this is going to be great. I'm going to listen to this in the car, and yeah, never did. So
well, something to look forward to, especially with the warmer weather coming up. But just to go full circle, it's a 7.5 for me as well. I just thought it was a very, very enjoyable listen and something that I'll probably go back to in due time. And one other thing, did you ever see the movie Rockstar?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean it's cheesy and it is what it is, but I remember loving it when I first saw it, and just because of being into the music and stuff like that. A little factoid for you: the bassist on this particular album, Jeff Pilson, is the bass player in Steel Dragon, in the movie Rockstar. So I thought you'd get a kick out of that.
The musician or the actor?
The musician. But I think that's a great question. I know that he does when he's playing bass. It's Jeff Pilson. I don't think he's acting as well, but I could be wrong.
Okay, because I know that like Jeff Scott Soto did the vocals, but he's not actually in the movie.
Yeah, right. He plays bass on the album, although he may be in the movie as well. Now you have me questioning it as well. But I'll say this: he definitely appears in the movie as the bassist, although okay. I know that Soto doesn't. But I thought that was a nice little a bow on this episode because I did think that you had seen it.
Yeah, it's actually a really fun movie. My friend Jay was like, "Oh my god, you have to watch this movie." So he was the one who played it for me, and I definitely enjoyed it quite a bit.
Nice. And with that, we'll put a bow on the episode this week. As I mentioned at the outset, we're going to come back next week with the Shadow Gallery career retrospective, which is going to be a lot of fun. I'll just say one thing about that. I was surprised at how much of their stuff I just remembered. And then there was one album, which I'm sure we'll talk about, which I have no recollection of whatsoever. And it's like, I was almost like comatose. I couldn't believe that it was an album that I played a lot, and I just have no memory of it whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to like kind of side by side talking about the history of the band, but also the history of our consumption of the band's of music. And I think that there's just going to be a lot of things to talk about. So I'm just going to leave it at that and save it all for the next week's episode. But the more I've been spending the last 3 weeks now kind of reacquainting myself, and I have to say some of it does not need to be reacquainted.
Yeah.
Some of it does, but I get more and more excited about our upcoming discussion, and they're probably not one of the more popular bands that we've discussed, comparatively speaking, but I
will enjoy it if nothing else,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people are gonna like really want to listen to two people talk about Shadow Gallery for 2 hours.
We did have multiple requests, so to be fair, there's people out there that want it because we had multiple requests for this band. So.
All right, so at least 2 people will listen to this this episode. But
on that note, we will get to the other requests that we have. In fact, we may even get to some of them sooner rather than later. And after we finish Shadow Gallery, I look forward to hearing your pick for the following week.
Yeah, I got nervous like halfway through this episode. I was like, oh crap, I didn't pick something for next week, and I'm like, oh wait, I have an extra week to think about it. So
I expect it to be extra good then.
Yeah, I was thinking about maybe doing Anthrax again. So
maybe it'll be more palatable this time. But I'll say this: we really appreciate the feedback. It's been coming in pretty steadily at this point, and we thank you for that. We ask that if you have anything else to say, reach out to us. If you have any requests, definitely let us know, because we are keeping tabs of that, and we will get to them all in the not so distant future. And leave us a review if we think it really does help other people find the show. So we appreciate that.
Right, and as we've mentioned before, if you leave us a review and you want to hear us discuss an album, your request will probably get fast tracked. So keep that in mind as a little bit of what do you call it?
Incentive,
yeah, to leave a review, because last I checked, I think we only have one on iTunes so far.
Yeah, so we know you're listening, but for some reason we don't know much more than that, other than the fact that you are listening. So thank you for that, and we will come back with some Shadow Gallery next week. Hope you're feeling better, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thanks, buddy. I'll talk to you next week.